Hello, this is Brainy Fox, and you're listening to the Brainy Fox podcast, where you can hear all about my swinging adventures, my scandalous lifestyle, and hear all the other fun stories that I have to tell. Enjoy! Please note that the adult nature of this podcast makes it inappropriate for people who are under 18. Sorry, kids. Hi, everyone, and welcome to my very first podcast. So people are always telling me that my life is very interesting and I should write a book. But I think I've come to the conclusion that I'm way too lazy to actually write a book. And I guess I like the sound of my own voice, so I decided I was going to do a podcast instead. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate you listening to this. That's great. It's very validating. Thank you. Well, I thought today I would sort of start with an introduction to tell you a little bit about myself and why it is that people think I'm so interesting. I live sort of a non-conventional lifestyle. I identify as polyamorous and as a swinger, so that means that I have a really non-traditional personal life. And I'm highly educated, so sometimes I feel like those things are in conflict, but maybe that's another discussion. But I operate as a single female in the lifestyle, which is a word that we use to describe swinging. And that makes interesting stories, but it also means that I have to navigate some things that are, I guess, tricky because probably they're non-conventional. Anyway, I'm going to come back to that. So I tend to feel like if I have an itch, I scratch it. So if I want to try something, I go out and do it. I don't know. I've always lived my life that way, and I feel like I can't imagine it being any differently. Generally, I end up in a good place, and I've decided that I've reached a point in my life, and I know exactly where I'm supposed to be because I've legitimately tried everything else. So the reason I decided to do this podcast was because I find that I have a lot of stories I'd like to tell, and I really don't have tons of people I can, discuss them with. So if I talked about them at work, it might make my coworkers feel uneasy because they're sort of non-conventional. And I can discuss them with my partners when I have them, but those will come in subsequent podcasts when I explain about my long-term relationships and how my lifestyle and my desires have been pros and cons for my personal relationships. Things are great at the moment. I even have a primary partner. But we seem to see eye to eye much more than I have with anybody I've previously dated, which is amazing. So maybe that's another story. So I guess it's probably interesting to understand how I came to be in the lifestyle. How did I understand that I like to date, be sexually involved with more than one other human being at the same time? And that can come in many forms. That means I can be in relationships with multiple people, or I can have sex with multiple people. And that means at the same time, or just during the same point in my life. And I think that when people ask me, how long have you been in the lifestyle? I have to be honest and say that as long as I've been sexually active, I have been on some level involved in a poly lifestyle or swinging. I remember from a very young age experimenting with women my age as well as men. I even have a juicy story where when I was in high school, I had sex with a guy and his brother at the same time. And it was great. Thanks, you guys. But I remember trying a three-way kiss when I was 17 years old. I might have been 16, but that was very exciting. And I just can't imagine being at a point in my life where I didn't have that going on. The truth is that I have tried monogamy on a couple of occasions as an adult, and it's really difficult to navigate. And I guess I'll get into that now. Basically, when you're in a relationship with one person, that means that you have to look to them to fulfill all of your needs, which, as I see it, can be a very heavy burden. And if you're not 100% in line with that person's needs, it can be really difficult. So if you're with one person, they are responsible for sort of your emotional well-being, your sexual satisfaction, and they sort of serve as a best friend. And sometimes people aren't 100% in sync with what it is that they feel strongly about, which is completely normal. But you have to sort of work that into being in a relationship. So if you find something really pivotal that you disagree upon, it's not like you can turn to another person to have a discussion about it or to have those needs met. So the way that I see it is when you're in a monogamous relationship, you are completely responsible. Like, one person is responsible for all of your needs, which is really heavy. But if you're willing to open your relationship up, then you can relieve your partner, especially if they're going through like a hard time and they're having a hard time meeting all of your needs, then you can sort of have them share that responsibility with someone else. And as we all know, different people are different. They have different styles. They have different ways of handling anxiety and stress. They have different ways of settling disagreements, working through conflict. And it's nice to have that kind of variety in your life where you can maybe have one partner that handles things in a very calm way or tends to just listen really, really well. And then you can also have another partner that maybe is a little more proactive and offers advice, and is more willing to sort of dissect things with you instead of just letting you unpack them yourself. So that's sort of deep and philosophical. But the thing is, I find that when I have multiple partners, they tend to have not necessarily similar personalities. Of course, we all have something in common, but you know, they have different styles, and I appreciate them for their individuality. I like that about them. And sex is the same way. And hey, this is a sexy podcast. Let's talk about the sex. When you are having sex with one person, yes, it's amazing because you can get really comfortable with them. You sort of get more comfortable in your own skin. You learn their little things that make them aroused. They learn your little secret buttons. And that's really great. So in other words, things do get better when you practice. So if you have a long-term partner and you've had sex with them for a long time, of course you get really good at it. Unfortunately, if things are slumping in your relationship and you're having less sex, then, you know, that doesn't come in as handy. But what's nice is different partners will have different styles in bed. So you might have somebody who's really enthusiastic and just really sort of gets in and throws you around and is like really about like hard pounding, screaming, sweaty sex. And I like that a lot. But it's also, there's some merit in the sensual, slow, soft kind of sex that you can have with other people. And in my experience, people generally have one style. Like, they're good at lots of them, but they have a favorite, and they have one that they're the best at. And that's great. And people's bodies are different. People's bodies feel different. So you may have one partner who's really tall and thin, and you'll have another one who's closer to your height. I guess I should have said taller and thin, and another one that's closer to your height who's a little softer and more supple. And those both have merits. You know, those are good in different ways. So I think where I was going was that I've always known that I am suited to having multiple partners. And yes, on a sexual level, that's great. I like to explore things sexually with multiple people. But I also like the opportunity to have sort of meaningful, sensual relationships with multiple partners too. And I've never really practiced that organized hierarchical polyamory, which I think is really terrific if you can do it. I just don't know that I am that organized. I don't know if that's the right word. But I think that it doesn't resonate with me with the way that it seems to with other people. And that's great. I think that, like, if that works for you, that's terrific. And to be honest, I've never found myself in a relationship with somebody who felt strongly enough about it to suggest that I adopt it as a lifestyle. And I would not at all be opposed to that. I just haven't really had the opportunity to try it. And it's not the sort of thing that resonated with me enough to give it a go on my own, if that makes any sense. And I date both men and women. I generally have found, as I have sort of matured and become more comfortable with my sexuality, that I am definitely most attracted to cis men. And I do love women. I love women as friends, and I love having sexual relationships with my good female friends, but I don't generally exclusively date women, not as like a primary partner. And I find that I don't often have sex with women alone. I don't know. I find like my sort of off the cuff preference is that the number of men outnumber the number of women in a sexual encounter, like in a group. That's just, I don't know, my preference. I think my first experience with group sex was when I was pretty young. I think I was in probably 17 or 18, and they weren't the kinds of encounters that I have, say, today, where it was not like today. I tend to, you set these things up, or you go places where there will be other couples who are on board with this. But when you're younger and before you've really adopted the lifestyle as like an explicit thing, you just sort of, these things kind of happen if you're lucky. So I had a handful of encounters like that. And then as I entered my 20s, oh God, I'm going to tell you guys my age. As I entered my 20s, I found that I still prefer dating multiple people, and I've always had sort of bad luck with it, in that I will be happily dating several male partners, and one of them will give me the ultimatum: I can't be with you anymore if you are still seeing other people. When we met, they found it very exciting that this was something that I did, because I'm always very honest with people. Like, I literally lay everything out to people on the first date. I don't monogamy. I have like this weird history that you might find shocking. I have, these preferences, and I don't know. My friend suggested that I should be more upfront in my dating profiles. I think exactly what he said was, you need to tell people, listen, I know you think it's cute that I've like had this lifestyle and I'm willing to date other people, but you need to understand that like no one is off limits. And I will even fuck your friends. I will fuck your friends. Which, I had to think about that. I'm not sure that's really true. But, I mean, it shouldn't be out of the realm of possibility if everybody's on board with it. The problem is that I meet men, and initially they find it super exciting that I have this polyamorous lifestyle, and I'm really comfortable with my sexuality, and I'm kind of an exhibitionist. But then when it comes down to it, they find that they get jealous, and they can't work through their jealousy. And then they sort of put it on me to make them feel better and ask that I not see other people, like tone it down a little bit. And that's problematic, because this is something that I really need in my life. And it's funny because I've ended relationships with really nice people because I just couldn't navigate the jealousy. And the idea that I would spend the rest of my life having sex with one other human being really fills me with a sense of dread. And that sounds really, I guess it only sounds awful because, culturally we're programmed to be monogamous, pair bonders. You're supposed to get married to one person and stay married to them and never cheat. And that does not work for me. And so I don't do it. I mentioned the things that I lay out to someone on a first date. And those include, of course, my preferences for non-monogamy, but there are a number of other things that I feel like I need to disclose to people before I embark on any kind of serious relationship with them, any kind of relationship with them. And that includes my professional history. So when I was 18, I tried college, found I didn't like it, and I moved out, and I moved to the big city where someone suggested that I try stripping. And I did always have an exhibitionist side. Like, I have always been the person who wears like a short skirt to the nightclub, or, sex in public when I was a teenager and stuff. So this appealed to me, and I tried it, and I found that it was pretty fun. Now, I feel like I should preface this by saying that I think that the stripping is different now than it was when I was doing it in like the 2000s. And I can't say that for sure, though, because I honestly haven't spent that much time in like topless bars in some time, actually. I don't know. I feel, you know what? Maybe I should do that soon. I think I'm going to put that on my list. Anyway, I worked as a stripper, and I have to say that I learned so much about people and relationships and myself from being a stripper that I would never hesitate to do it again. Like, at that point in my life, like, I'm definitely a little old to be getting up there, but I learned that I didn't really need to feel like an ugly duckling. I always felt sort of plain when I was in high school. I never felt like I was noticed. And I didn't ever feel validated or attractive. And the idea that somebody would hand me money just because I was standing in front of them naked was really validating. Like, that really made me feel attractive in a sort of an objective way. Like, when I didn't feel that way subjectively, I definitely felt like, well, here's some tangible evidence that people think I'm hot enough to hand me a buck. And so that was great. And also, you know, it's a little scary to do it the first time, but you sort of get over it. So now when I'm ever asked to do any public speaking, that is like chump change compared to like getting on stage totally naked for the first time. So I worked as a stripper for a while. I did some modeling, which probably should go in air quotes because I did like fetish modeling and I wasn't particularly successful with it. But I moved to a bigger city where I was doing some stripping there. And, you know, I also bartended. I did a bunch of other things. But when I was working at one club in particular, they sort of took a liking to me and asked me to sort of be one of their representatives. They had like a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead. And they had the three of us that they would sort of take out at events because we were reasonably articulate too, which meant that they could use us in the radio or on television. And so we would go and my picture was on billboards and stuff. So I sort of got noticed that way. And then I got asked to do a little bit more mainstream work. And at some point, someone asked me to pose for a men's magazine. Now, those don't even exist anymore because now, like, everyone gets their porn for free on the internet. But I think the organizations are still there. But the niche that I did most of my naked magazine work was in the leg magazines because I have nice legs and I have sort of a penchant for fancy lingerie and heels. And I'm flexible. So that made me, like, kind of a leg magazine person. And it's really validating to see yourself on the cover of a magazine. Like, there's just something sort of cool about that. So at some point, I was asked to do, you know, a few other more mainstream things, including, you know, there's a show on television that I was on about strippers, and I started touring as like a headliner stripper. So then I was no longer a stripper. I was like the stripper, and I did pageants and I won titles, and it was all very exciting. And things sort of hit a crescendo just before the housing market crashed in 2008. And there was a definite shift in the strip club industry after 2008 because people just didn't have disposable income like they did. And around that time, that's about when I got out of the business, actually. But at the very end of my like trip through the whole adult industry, and I had a website and I was on websites, but I never actually I never crossed the line to do like boy girl porn. I had lots of girl on my website, and I was happy to be naked with other women. And I don't know why I put that up as like somehow that was one thing was more than I could handle and the other one was okay. Like, I don't know why it's okay to have sex with women on camera, but it would somehow be like crossing a line for me to have sex with men on camera. And I think it may have had something to do with the people that I was dating wouldn't have been comfortable with it. Like, it was okay if your girlfriend's out having sex with other women. Somehow that's different because we're all like objectified. That's a different discussion. But finally, I found myself in Los Angeles in 2006 or 2007, and I was approached by people in the adult film industry, and I guess that I hadn't really given it a legitimate chance. And so what I found was that it wasn't, for me at least, the like horrible, scary, overwhelming place that people said it was. I never had a no list. I had a yes list. So in other words, I called my agent and would say, hey, you know who I'd kind of like to work with? And she would set it up for me. I never did any anal either. But the sum total of my porn career was that I think I shot 12 scenes totally for other people. And then there were a handful that I shot only for my website. And it was really fun. Like, I totally enjoyed the actual sex. I enjoyed being on camera, and they make you feel sort of glamorous. Like, you show up and there's like a team of makeup artists. Well, there's like a makeup artist, and then they have wardrobe sometimes, and there's a whole set, and there's people like, running around, and there's lighting, and you feel like a movie star. And then you get to have great sex, right? And I always really liked at the end when I looked a little like raggedy, where my hair was messed up and my like false eyelashes were coming off, because that meant that I had had a good time. But the movies were really fun and validating, and I actually legitimately enjoyed the sex. So if you ever get a chance to see any of it, meh. Yeah, no, that's real. And the reason I decided to end my illustrious pornography career of 12 movies was that I did shoot one scene, and I just really didn't click with the male talent. And in the end, I felt like he kind of got snarky. So here's what happened. We shot this at a hotel. It was supposed to be like shot in a hotel. Like, there's some dude picks up the chick. So I was walking around in this courtyard in the hotel wearing like a slutty dress, and we end up in the hotel room. And I think that he either just didn't find me attractive, or he was having a bad day. And there were weird extraneous people on the set, which can be very distracting for the male talent. And so he was having a hard time keeping his edge, which means that he was having trouble with his erection. And this guy was in his 20s, so like it was definitely a situational thing. But I felt like he was holding against me, and I was doing what I could to make it look good. And this was the only time I really had to like fake what I was into in a scene, which was a real bummer. And at the end, the only thing that I asked of him was that he not pop in my eye. I didn't want him to like ejaculate into my contact lens. And he intentionally popped in both of my eyes at the end. And I really still didn't understand what I did wrong. Like, he was just having some kind of bad day. Anyway, the nuts and bolts of it was that I did not enjoy that scene. And it occurred to me that even 1 in 12 that I was going to like not like and want to go home and feel icky was not good odds for me. So I quit. I literally just left the entire industry and really never looked back. I shut down my website. I moved away from Los Angeles, and at that time, I just completely reevaluated my life and went back to school, actually. And really, like, that's where my current career started, and I've sort of been on that trajectory ever since. And that initial transition was sort of a shock in that, I'd always lived this very free, outspoken lifestyle where I would wear shirts that said, like, fuck me before I changed my mind. And I would never be caught dead in public, anything like that now. And suddenly I had to reevaluate all that because I had to have this whole different outward appearance. And I actually went through a second period of feeling like an ugly duckling. But I did some nice things for myself. Like I got braces and I got laser eye surgery. And I buckled down and I went to school and I finished. And now I have degrees and a career, and it's great. But there were a few years there where I wasn't sure if it was okay to continue to have my sort of sexual appetites and lifestyle choices that I had before, now that things were sort of outwardly more normal. And it was uncomfortable. And I had a few awkward initial encounters with people. I even had a marriage that, like, I think I rushed into, where we met with the understanding that we would be swingers. Like, our first date was at a swing party. That's a thing I do. And then there were jealousy issues, and it was like a thing. Yeah. Anyway, but I think now, as I've been at this for a while, and I've sort of just started to be more at ease with myself and get more comfortable in my own skin, just be more mature, give it some more thought, realize, that I'm independent and I have good things going on. I'm okay with it. And I realize that, yes, there aren't that many people who are really on board with my lifestyle, but that's okay, because the people who are really get me. And so I have this sort of close-knit bunch of people that I feel close to, and they don't judge me. And then there are other people with whom I do not discuss my personal life. So I think that, yeah, dating in the swing lifestyle as a single woman can be tricky, because you can approach it as like you just go out and have sex with people, or you can try to navigate it as dating, but like there's sometimes awkward expectation that if you go on a date with a guy that you've met on like a swing website, that you definitely have to have sex with them. And that's actually not true. So if this is something you're thinking of exploring, like, it's not true. I think you will have the most success with women on any kind of dating website if you go into it with no actual expectation. Like, just think any sort of connection that happens is like a nice bonus that you've both agreed on. It's great for both of you. And there's it shouldn't have to happen just because that's the nature of the party that you're attending or the nature of the website that you met on. But, yeah, so I think that's kind of how I got where I am now. And I think the reason that I decided I wanted to do this podcast, as I said in the beginning, was that I really have all these cool stories and very few people really know all of them. And I sometimes just want to get them out there and get them off my chest. It's been suggested to me that I should write a book, but I don't know that I'm that organized, or at least I don't know that I'm that organized with my extra free time that I could navigate writing a book, on top of everything else that I do. I do currently have a partner who's very cool. We're doing a lot of traveling, and he legitimately is not weird and jealous. It seems very cool. And I know that I'm finding myself hesitating to take opportunities to, go on dates with people or go to events because I don't want things to go sour with him because, that's been my experience in the past. And I guess it's always sort of one's habit, or it's generally easy to get into the habit of projecting the faults of your old partners on new partners. And that's very unfair, but I think it's human nature. And yeah, so I've decided I'm going to do this podcast because I have a lot of really cool stories. And I feel like I also would like to interact with some people that I haven't met yet, because I think there's something very cool about the internet and the nature of having the capacity to meet and communicate with people that are not necessarily close to you physically. And so I'll answer questions and I will tell of my adventures. In fact, I have some cool stuff coming up in the near future. I get to go back to Desire, which is a lifestyle resort in Cancun, Mexico, which is always really, really fun. And I get to take my first swing-themed trip to Phoenix, Arizona. I think later this fall, I get to go to Denver, maybe? I've never been to Club Trapeze in Atlanta. I know there is more than one, but the one that I keep thinking I'd like to go to is in Atlanta. So I think that a trip there is in order in the near future. And then I also, I think those will be fun things to talk about. And I think maybe I will invite other people to talk with me on my show. And I don't know. I guess I'm just going to see how this is received and where things go. And I'll make my mind up about what I want to do with it then, because I get to do that. So thanks for listening. I appreciate that I probably rambled a little bit incoherently. I sort of had some notes about what I was going to talk about, but I find that I haven't followed them. So I would definitely be receptive to questions about me, my history, my desires, my thoughts about the lifestyle, my opinions about things. I love giving my opinion. And so I will have an email link on my website, and you are welcome to fill out the form or contact me by email or comment on my Instagram feed, and I will try to address any cool questions that I get on my next podcast. So I guess with that, I will close and say thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to the Brainy Fox podcast. If you want to find out all about me or hear the rest of my podcasts, you can visit me at my website, thebrainyfox.com. That should actually have all you need to know about me and any way to get in touch with me. So, thank you. See you soon.